who haven't settled down yet to occupy the seats in front. There are still available seats in front. for first semester's academic convocation for the school year 2016 to 2017. My name is Shane Imperial, a faculty member of the Social Sciences Department. I will be the MC for this afternoon's convocation. Part of our continuing formation as an academic and Jesuit community that is committed to the promotion of social justice and concern for marginalized sectors of our society is a regular academic convocation in which members of academic personnel gather for a lecture or a conversation on themes related to our identity and mission as a Catholic, Jesuit, or Filipino university. This engagement is further meant to expand, update, and deepen our own social consciousness as teachers for the benefit of our students and with the hope of moving us closer to becoming a community marked by a well-rounded social responsiveness inspired by our faith. Today, we come together once again to reflect and dialogue on the same belief, on what it means to be a community of faith that is committed to God, to our neighbors, to human society, and to creation. Our present theme, Refocusing or Gaze on Mindanao, a New Frontier, highlights Mindanao as a frontier where conflicts and displacements constitute identity, as well as threat to that same identity. A frontier that demands from us honest recognition and a well-grounded understanding that could best dispose us towards concrete response as a Jesuit university. To formally begin our convocation this afternoon, let us all rise for the opening prayer to be led by the Ateneo de Nave University Choir. Immediately after the prayer, we ask everyone to remain standing for the sake of the Philippine National Anthem. Let us feel the presence of our God in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. call on our University President, Jesuit Father Primitivo E. Viday Jr.
Diyos maray na hapon sa inyong lubos. Ang mga late sa likod, pwede nang humikiti sa tubangan. There are more seats here. Please do not stand at the back. Kung nakaabot ang mga halip sa bukid, ang mga tagapakol, naamay sila kamo kay Puhan, hindi ka mo sa tubangan. Dahil ako magpadagos, kung dahil ko mo mag-pwede. Sige, mahalap ko na. No pulling down of chairs. Mayang hapon, Dr. Jose Jowel Cadunay. We are delighted to have you today with us. Fellow administrators, faculty, and staff, and I don't know if there are guests around, but welcome to everybody. Indeed, it is a wonderful occasion to gather on this very wonderful opportunity to focus on a topic that is really very much part of our own efforts to see where to situate Ateneo University in the context of our own desire to contribute to national development and to be part of the roadmap of the Philippine province of the Society of Jesus. It is also fortunate, and I would like to do this not to embarrass him, but so that you will know and see who he is in person. I would like to call the junior high school OIC principal, Father Gabi Gonzalez. Father Gabi, can you stand so that they can see you? They have been asking about you. He is embarrassed already. The reason I mention him is also he is, as most Jesuits are, multitasking. He is also tasked by the provincial to coordinate the efforts of the province on trying to see how the implementation, planning and implementation, together with all the other institutions, Jesuit institutions, on the province roadmap. And as you have been made well aware of many times, I myself have spoke about it, the province roadmap indicates the different directions or thrusts of the province. And if you can remember correctly, I mentioned in the letter of our DAVP, Mindanao is a particular thrust of the province, a major thrust of the province. If we see ourselves therefore as part of the Jesuit institutions in the country, we cannot but be aligned with the mission of the Philippine province. And therefore, we who are here in Luzon and in Bicol should make every effort. All the more we should make every effort to understand the situation in Mindanao. We cannot distance ourselves. We cannot say, "Narayo man kita duman sa Mindanao." It is our obligation as Christians, as a Jesuit institution, to learn more. And in the coming days, Father Gabi, together with those who are charged with facilitating the province roadmap, we will try to identify points of insertion for our university. Where in the province roadmap, in the implementation of the trust to do something for Mindanao, to be part of the Mindanao plan, where do we see ourselves? We don't know. We will have structures to address that. But the point is, I think this is very auspicious in that we can see better, understand better the very urgent concerns of Mindanao. So I thank everybody for taking time to come here to be part of this afternoon's convocation. You can watch the Ignacio de Loyola after. Bring your family and friends. I think we're doing okay. I don't think they will close down the movie house because of lack of moviegoers. So I think it will continue for the weekend and for next year. Thanks to Dr. Noel Bulante for arranging also the screenings. We are doing well. So again, for everybody, thank you very much for coming here. Thank you very much, Dr. Cadunay, for taking time. Good afternoon to everybody.
Thank you, Father Louis. Now to introduce to us our speaker for this afternoon, may we call on the chairperson of the Social Sciences Department, Mr. Emmanuel Vito C. Avejero.
Our resource speaker in today's academic convocation is an assistant professor of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Ateneo de Manila University. He is a social anthropologist whose interest is on the study of forced migration and local and national government response to displacement events. He obtained his Doctor of Philosophy in Social and Cultural Anthropology from the University of Oxford, United Kingdom. His doctoral thesis, Music, Dance, Videos, Identity Making, and the Cosmopolitan Imagination in the Southern Philippines, examines vernacular expressions of cosmopolitanism in the creative works of marginalized Muslim cultural performers and video makers. He argues for an expansion of the analytical frame of rooted cosmopolitanism from a singular perspective of belongingness and connections to a multifaceted view of local social phenomena. His current involvements, aside from being an assistant professor from the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, are the following: Managing Editor, Social Transformations, Journal of the Global South, published by the Ateneo de Manila University. Chief Executive Officer, Mindanao News and Information Cooperative Center, Project Manager, Public Participation in the Communication of the Bangsamoro. He is presently investigating appraisal on the state of social relationships in post-conflict Zamboanga. In partnership with his colleagues from Ateneo de Manila University, they are currently investigating vote of the poor, ethno-political social identities in mostly Mindanao. Is Bangsamoro identity possible? Anthropological traditions in the Philippines. Some of his published works include Zamboanga Dreams, Freedom from Fear, published online in 2013, Beyond Powerlessness, Celebrating the Power of the Displaced in the Modern Prince and the Modern Sage, Transforming Power and Freedom by Sage Publications, London in 2009. And lastly, Bakwit, The Power of the Displaced by Ateneo de Manila University Press in 2009. The book critically examines the politics of aid as well as locates local resources and capacities for empowerment among communities caught in the current internal armed conflicts. Arguments in the book have been cited in an array of papers, including policy discussions commissioned by the Social Development Department of the World Bank. With these published works, he was the winner in 2010 National Book Awards for his book Bakwit, and also winner as contributor in 2015 National Book Awards for Rigo, Conflict and Conflict Management in Mindanao, Expanded Edition. Ladies and gentlemen, with deep gratitude for this privilege and with so much regard for his wholesome achievements in current endeavors, it is my honor to introduce to you our resource speaker, Dr. Jose Jowel Cadunay.
Thank you very much for the warm word welcome, starting from Father Guerrero and Dr. Avejero. It was an overly generous introduction. I'm squirming as I'm listening to that introduction. But no. It was really a pleasure to join you and to be invited. I never expected that I get an invitation from Janet, and when she dropped it, I think it took me a little bit of time to actually decide to take it. And but then I went on. These good soldiers are supposed to be what they should be. But then I actually trembled when I was asking how many people would come in and listening about it. And Janet figured that it's about 350. That was huge. I'm not really used to such a big audience. I'm more, I thrive in intimate settings, 15, 20 people. Or the most that I had in one setting is in a classroom environment. Just last summer where I got 70, 75 students. But then, who would not take on the challenge? And I'm very glad that you have me here. And it was truly an honor. Okay, as I noted on the screen, I'll be talking about conflicts, particularly in Mindanao, but not just one dimension of it, but the recurrent, shall we say, incidents and events that constitute what we would call the Mindanao problem. So we'll try to track the intractable nature of these conflicts and shall we say, in a disheartening way, as well as probably in some confusing manner, because I would introduce you to the different layers of actors as well as different areas by which conflicts have become very, very complicated. We'll be distilling this in 2 hours, but this is actually a longer period in the making. So I will be ramming you this complexity. And for that, I already beg for your indulgence and to hold on me, to be with me throughout the time of the lecture. Hopefully I'll end with a more hopeful note, as I noted in the title of the talk. But to begin with, I think it would be nice to situate and locate the situation in Mindanao based on the developments that we are seeing in the country. I am originally from Davao. I grew up in Davao, I studied in Davao, I finished my undergrad at the Ateneo de Davao, and I went on to study my master's degree also in Mindanao, particularly at the same year in Ateneo de Cagayan. So in a sense, I've been embedded for quite a while in the region. Before I was an anthropologist, I was a journalist for quite some time. We worked with the Inquirer, and then later on established what was introduced in introduction, the News. We have websites in the news.com. We deliver the news on, particularly on conflicts and other events in Mindanao. It is in this context that I'll be presenting you the next slide. The context of what I'm doing and what I have done early on and what's going on in the national conversation and national development. Particularly the election of Rodrigo Duterte, my kababayan, who's from Davao and whom I also covered for quite some time when I was yet a journalist in Davao. It's 10 years I've been covering here. I'll start off with this video clip that I found from Rappler.com. It's a news website. And it featured how the Muslim communities had reacted to the campaign of Rodrigo Duterte. This is before he was elected as president. And I wish to invite you onto how he articulated the Mindanao concerns and problems, and how people, particularly in the Muslim areas, or the Moro areas as we call it, had responded onto that articulation that he had done. And then I would move on to talk about a little bit about the history, or shall we say, the longer background of this conflict. But let's watch the video first and see how this discourse or how this discussion had come through during the elections, and how people had reacted that may have been a factor in his overwhelming win in the elections.
This is the reaction of the crowd in Mindanao. Upon the arrival of Davao City Mayor Rodrigo Duterte in Mindanao, Duterte reciprocated, declaring his devotion for the Muslim communities of Mindanao. Mindanao is the most well-rich province in the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. Duterte tells them he's the only candidate who has their interests at heart.
Sino ang kandidato dito sa kaso na nagsasabi ang problema ng mono, ang problema ng bibig, ang problema sa kawalaan pati puto. Wala! Ako ay tatakbo ng presidente at ayusin ko ang Mindanao.
The Davao City Mayor is overwhelmingly Mindanao's top choice for president, according to recent surveys. The arm is dominated by local government officials belonging to the ruling Liberal Party. That doesn't stop former Lumuan Mayor Jowel, part of an influential family, from supporting Duterte.
Talaga po hindi tayo nayayin talagang siya na wala na iba.
Mindanao is a poor province, constantly rocked by violence from secessionist Muslim groups. Duterte proposes adopting the Bangsamoro Basic Law into his vision of a federal state to bring peace to the province.
Ano yan? Ano talaga yan sa bibig? Huwag na natin galawin. Mag-federal tayo para mapagbigyan natin ang ating mga kababayan sa ibang lugar.
For Ronson Masikip, Duterte is the only choice.
Gusto niyo sa kanya?
Kasi matapang at malakakit yan.
Ano po tingin niyo sa ibang mga kandidato?
Diba? Wala yan?
Later that day, Duterte visits Coronadal City in South Cotabato. Before his speech, he puts the Philippine flag to his heart. He says he wants peace in Mindanao because he has Muslim family members.
Kung away tayo, magtanong ko yung muro, saan ako pupunta? Sa Kristiyano kong mga ako, o sa muro kong mga ako? Usap tayo. Kasi yung muro ko kanina, I love my country and we must remain in
In a city where he has no allies among local government officials, he tells the audience to make up their own minds on who to vote.
Kaya ang ginagawa ng Manila, sila ang huli. Ito ang ating presidente. Opo. Ito ang ating presidente ngayon. Yun, sinan, ito ngayon. So anong ngayon natin? Upang na binabago ng Manila.
In less than a month, will the Philippines elect a Mindanaoan president? Peter Nada, rapper, South Cotabato.
Okay, forgive me for not editing out the curses, but it won't be here unless we show it as well. What we can parse this in so many ways, but I think you would have a good idea on how he won almost every other place in Mindanao during the last election, except for Agusan del Norte and Agusan del Sur. That's the only two provinces that he had not won all across. It was the previous week. It suggests many levels. It suggests the hope that he he offers the promise that he articulated, but he also suggests how big the problem is. If like the person that was interviewed has no any other choice but him, who had not only articulated the problems of Mindanao, but also embodied the, shall we say, the complexity, the diversity, onto his flesh, onto his DNA. My mother is a Muslim. My grandchildren are also Muslims because my son had married a Muslim, have a Muslim wife. So he embodied all of that, and so therefore we are treated onto a kind of a representation that brings everything onto his blood and soul. The concerns, the grief, the grievance, as well as the yearning and the cries of the people whom we will be talking about this afternoon. And not only that, he also tried to locate the concerns, the problem, the situation of Mindanao today within a historical time frame. And this is what he said during his State of the Nation address, at least part of it. That Mindanao is unsettled history, and it's time to do something with the history of Mindanao. In his own words, I know that you know, on 1521, Magellan landed in Leyte. Mindanao was already Islam by 100 years. So ano ito? It's an imperialism thing. There's a historical injustice committed against the Moro people. We have to correct it, but it is well possible now. The hope and the past all brought into one statement. Now, it would, on one glance, it would show, it would articulate, and it would appear that several layers of concerns and problems were underscored just in this few words, two, three sentences that he had uttered. But we try to also look at the broader picture of the historical dimensions of the subject that we are talking now, the subject that is Mindanao, and the many tears and blood and complexities that it has spawned through the years. It's good to see Mindanao from the perspective of history. And if you look at the perspective of history, we might find out that it's not exactly a neat articulation, or we don't exactly have a, shall we say, a neat articulation of how should we understand our history, our collective history, not just Mindanao, but the entire country as well. If we start off with 1898 and come back to 1521, some other people would contest that, and Duterte has been contesting the idea that the history of the Philippines should be reckoned with in 1521. For him, there's more into our history than the coming of Magellan. But rather, we have to look past that because we have deeper ties down historical time and in a broader world that is the Islamic world. So, as I was articulating, Islam predated Christianity by about 100 years. But then, if you also listen to other voices in Mindanao, you also hear on the station of this kind of narrative. The narrative is that, no, actually, there's already a community, there's already a formation of people in the Philippines prior to the coming of Islam. For 10,000 years, or 800 years, there have been training, active engagement by people in many parts of Mindanao and in other parts of the Philippines in the broader Southeast Asian world. And archaeological evidences would show today that Butuan, a city in the northern part of Mindanao, is critical. It has played a, shall we say, a significant role in that relationship way back before the coming of Islam, 900 years later. So there's a Butuan trade, and there are also many other trades all throughout the rest of Southeast Asia, India, China, and probably even Africa as well, going through what we would now call as the South China Sea the Indian Ocean, and all across the Arabian Peninsula. But even before this maritime trade, there are already many other settlements wherein we can grab and locate our history. Archaeological finds also suggest that earlier than 320, there were already people in some other parts of coastal Mindanao, as evidenced by the discovery of burial jars in a obscure town today that we would call Maitong, in the province of Sarangani, where Manny Pacquiao comes from, where he came from. There, at the edge of the province, there's a cave wherein they found some jars that contain this significant remains. That tells us that there are more people with an active, sophisticated social formation as revealed by the kind of art and the kind of technology that they had. Production of jars with anthropomorphic figures suggests a more advanced and sophisticated society. So there's more to history than we do learn from our history books, and even from how the current president has articulated and contested the history that we know from the history books. Now, it is the context that I would want us to understand the historical dimension of this slide that I am showing you, the current profile of people in Mindanao. So the current profile of people in Mindanao stands out to the layers of past that comes together in some ways that brought forth this kind of arrangement. First population, just basic, Mindanao has about 21 billion people, about 30% of the country's population. Sorry, that's not 82%, that's 8%, sorry, for Lumad. 8% is Lumad. About 20% are the Moro people, and the majority is 71%. That would be normally called ourselves as the majority Filipinos. But there's also another reality in Mindanao. The fact that all across the years, the 100 years, there have been other kind of blending, there have been other kind of relationship that were established, and that is the mixing of ancestry. So it can no longer be cut into Lumad, Moro, majority Filipinos, because there's a number of coming together, not only in terms of relationship between communities, but at the very heart of our existence, by blood, by DNA, by genetics, and by family. I myself, my father hails from Iloilo, but my mother's mother, her grandmother, is an indigenous Manobo in the Sarangani area. So I couldn't locate myself in Lumad or majority Filipino kind of distinction of the people in Mindanao. I might be there in the mixed ancestry and mixed religion as well. Though there are no Muslims, at least what I can record in our family, but there are many other beliefs as well. But the other things, my kin connections. So in terms of diversity, this is the picture of what Mindanao may look like today, and how we could understand and grapple the history that I was showing you a while ago. So there's so much into that history, but there's also other things that are going on in the present time, in the current position that we are in. Now, the sad story here is that amid the complications of our history and amid the diversity of our relationships, we have some figures to consider. 48 years, for instance. 48 years is the years by which those relationships that I showed you earlier had been unraveled, had been affected by what we call the Mindanao conflicts. 48 years is the number of years wherein the conflict that we're talking about had been raging on. That's half a century. That is way older than I am, and that's almost the age of my my elder, shall we say, the elders of my generation lives. And in that 48 years, one question has remained unresolved. The question of the Hmong people and the question of indigenous people. Might be a bit hot, but please bear with me on this. It would get hotter a little bit as I move on into this, shall we say, confusing figures. 75%. In the 48 years of armed conflict in Mindanao, 75% of the total troops in the Philippines had been deployed into the island. So that is almost the entire armed forces of the country. They've been deployed back and again into the region since the 1970s. Other significant figure is 73 billion. According to study conducted by Professor Rudy Rodil, who's based in Mindanao, this is the amount of money that was spent to prosecute the conflict, the war in many parts of the region. That's a lot of money. 120,000. Because there's war and money was spent for the war, you would expect people losing their lives. 120,000 is the figure of lives lost, estimated at least, of the moral constituency who fought against the government as in the name of rebellion or in the name of secessionism. 50% of the 120,000 moral groups who lost their lives are actually part or members of what we would now refer to as MILF for the Abu Sayyaf. I'll talk a little bit more about these groups as we move on. 30% comes from the government military, the soldiers, and an estimated 20% are civilians. Yes, not too many civilians at the time, but it would be a little bit difficult to really count those who were regarded as moral rebels and civilians. Because sometimes in the battlefield, the identities gets mixed up for various reasons and for various matters. Some might be suspected as moral rebels, some may not exactly be rebels but were drawn into the war, or some were actually civilians but somehow had to fight back for some reasons that they had to. So they were civilians, they become rebels, and that complicated this figure. So these are the kinds of numbers that we're talking about. These are staggering numbers of lives lost, and these are also staggering amount of money as well as resources being poured in the region in the past 50 years. Now, how do we make sense and get sense of why that much money, why that much lives lost, why too much blood for a piece of land, for a piece of the region? Why there's so much fighting that's going on? What's driving the conflict? What is pushing the people to engage in a warfare that is not only bleeding people but also bleeding our resources dry, our collective national resources dry? I'll start off with this photograph just for us to have a good sense. Some of you may have already seen this. But this was a photograph, I think, it was published in several American newspapers in 1905, 1906. It was a photograph of the victory of American soldiers in the battle against a band of Moro community, Moro people, on the mountains of Mindanao, in what we would now call today as the Sulu province, in an island called Cadunay. They fought in defiance against American presence, but actually the story is that they were fighting against the taxation imposed by the Sultan also. They defied the Sultan. The Sultan went to the U.S. soldiers, and the Sultan asked the U.S. soldiers to quell the defiance being initiated by the people in Mindanao. The Americans trying to grip its hold onto the Cebu archipelago, readily accepted the Sultan's plea in exchange for some other agreements, conditions, and it ended up with this: women, children, and men all killed in that battle. Some American newspapers call this a massacre on Mindanao. That's 1906. And this image are the kind of image that continues to sear into many of the Muslim constituencies, historians, even down the line in the communities today. And we have these searing images of colonialism as a backdrop by which other complications on land that I was talking about. So it's a complication on land, but clouding that is the atrocity that had been committed during colonialism. But there's more to this atrocity, and as I already noted, and I keep on repeating the issue of land. With that atrocity hanging on as a backdrop, the early 1900s, 1905, 1906, 1910, was a period of American colonial consolidation in the country. And how did they consolidate their power? They didn't only consolidate through military things. They consolidate through resources, particularly arrangement of land. So several administrative policies were initiated, particularly during the colonial period, that was later on continued by the post-colonial governments. But here are the few that they had done. It's part of the colonial policy in the 1900s is to encourage migration to Mindanao, from Visayas to Central Luzon, and even people from the Bicol region, the Bicol communities that thrive today in Mindanao would track their roots onto this call for migration to Mindanao. During this period, Mindanao has vast lands, much of it forest, but people in Visayas and Luzon would know how to tame forests, and so they did, and they were sent to several other parts of the region. Now, the call was quite successful. The policy was quite successful, at least the policy of migration to Mindanao. By the way, this is the era wherein the idea that Mindanao is not a province had been conjured in the public imagination, the popular imagination. So the idea that we're going to the land of promise, which is at one level quite biblical, land of promise Canaan, and another level an offer that there's hope beyond Visayas and Luzon. So many went, and that triggered a sharp population alteration in Mindanao. And this is how it went. In 1903 and 1912, the United States, when they colonized our country, had actually enacted two policies. One policy is that a civilian colonial government would be established from the seat of power, which is Manila, and that would cover on many other parts in the country, except for particular regions, two particular regions, Cordillera and Mindanao. Cordillera and Mindanao would not exactly be administered by the civilian government, but rather by a U.S. military region, the U.S. military government. In Mindanao, that military government, established by the U.S., staffed by U.S. generals, was called the Government of the Morgue Province. At least they call it the Morgue Province. And there's another one in Cordillera. They had an administrative structure, but they didn't exactly call it a province, but they operated in the two areas. In this context, one of the generals who also administered the Morgue Province asserted that, debated and insisted that there's a distinction and in fact tensions between the Muslims in Mindanao and other people in the Philippines. So he was saying that while the migration goes on and on, there's in fact a tension in Mindanao. All this kind of discourses, all this kind of articulation, argument, led me to the filing of a bill in 1926 before the U.S. Congress, we are yet under the colonial government, that Mindanao would be separated from the rest of the Philippines. There were already talks of independence from 1912 all the way to the 1920s, and all the way to the discussion of establishing a Commonwealth government for the country. This bill that was proposed seeks for the non-inclusion of Mindanao in the Philippine Commonwealth government. So there's a separation for it. It sprung from the idea of Leonard Wood, who was the commanding officer and administrator of the Moro province, that the Moro and the rest of the people in the Philippines cannot mix. They're like oil and water. They just cannot go hand in hand. And so therefore, this bill was proposed. But it didn't exactly succeed because the Commonwealth government was established. But the spirit of this bill continues to circulate. At least the idea of the bill continues to sear into the mind, to convince that this should be the way for Mindanao. So as early as the 1920s, there was already a plan that the Mindanao is not part of the rest of the country. Now, it didn't help that there were policies, land policies in particular, that were enacted that somehow helped articulation or help in building that idea that there's actually tension in the rest of between the rest of the Philippines and the Muslim communities in Mindanao. But not only Muslims, but also indigenous peoples. And this is how it looks like. In 1902, a national public land act, well, a colonial public land act was enacted by the U.S. colonial government of the Philippines. This is the period wherein or the law that establishes the idea that all lands in the Philippines should be regarded as lands belonging to the state or as land belonging to the colonial state. It springs from an idea that is called the Legal Doctrine. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's a doctrine that articulates, a legal doctrine, a legal principle that suggests that by 1560s, when the Spaniards had successfully conquered the Philippines, all of the Philippine land should be regarded as a land belonging to the Spanish crown. So it is a regal land. It is a monarchical land. It is a land that belongs to the king and queen of Spain. It is the monarchy of Spain. So when the Treaty of Paris of 1898 was inked and the Americans bought the country for $20 billion, the Regalian doctrine or the principles had been imposed, had been part of, shall we say, not exactly the discussion, but the idea of what the Philippines is buying, what the U.S. is buying. The U.S. is buying the land from the monarchy of Spain. And because it's buying from the monarchy of Spain, and the principle is that all lands in the Philippines belong to the monarchy of Spain, and therefore, it now belongs to the U.S. government. So, it really doesn't matter on who occupies particular lands and who actually has particular, shall we say, titles or papers that attest to ownership of lands in the Philippines. Or, not papers, but actual occupants. It really doesn't matter. It's just that even if you occupy that land, that still belongs to the Spanish crown. But then, the Public Land Act, there were a series of land acts in 1902, there was 1903, there was 1904. I've just shown that three. Another land act suggests that, or imposed that, the colonial government would recognize land titles that were issued by the Spanish colonial government. If you don't have a Spanish colonial land title, then that wouldn't be your land. That would be the land that would be owned by the colonial state, the American government. So anything that has not been titled by the Spanish colonial government of the Philippines would automatically go through the U.S. colonial government ownership. So this is the case. And from that, was established and was enacted that allows for the titling of lands by the U.S. government. So this is already the, shall we say, the U.S. government taking charge on the administration of land policies in the country. In that administration of land policies, the U.S. government took onto the colonial government took onto its own that it is the entity authorized to issue title all across the country, not just in Mindanao, but all across the country. Now, the effect of that policy is devastating in Mindanao. How it is devastating? It didn't recognize that there were already communities, there were already formations, there were already entities that were occupying many parts of Mindanao. It's just that during the Spanish time, they didn't register their land or land titling to the Spanish crown because the Spanish crown are not there in Mindanao anyway. In fact, the Spaniards had only succeeded in occupying certain parts of land in Mindanao, but not the entire Mindanao. Vast tracts of land, in reality, in actual sense, doesn't actually belong to the Spanish crown. The Spanish crown didn't even know that those lands exist. And yet, by the scope of that agreement, and the law that was enacted by the Americans, it all now belongs to the American crown. So suddenly, they're no longer the owners of the land. Suddenly, they would have to provide the proof that the land is theirs. So in effect, no Moro or indigenous people would have owned the land during this period. It's only the government. And with that policy, a series of land acts were established. And part of the 1914 Land Act was to award at least 16 hectares of land to anyone who would migrate to Mindanao. If you're coming from Luzon, from Visayas, if you decide to migrate to Mindanao, just list down your name to the Bureau of Lands under the U.S. colonial government, and automatically, presto, just because you're registered, you will have a 16-hectare land in Mindanao. And no land was ever issued, no land title was ever issued to those who were already living in Mindanao, Muslims, indigenous peoples. They were not allowed, they were prohibited to register in any of these lands. Only the migrants can register for titling. But if you're a corporation and if you decide to operate in Mindanao, you could be granted 1,024 hectares. Now in 1912, after 1919, they amended the land law by expanding the land that could be offered to those who want to migrate to Mindanao from 16 hectares to 24 hectares. And my grandfather, who married my Manolo grandmother, is an Ilocano, and he availed of this. So he got 24 hectares just by registering his name in Davao del Sur. And because he knows the way, he's an Ilocano, he had studied, he had finished high school, and high school at that time is like K-12 now. He actually teach, he was a teacher, and he was able to teach, and he knows how the land laws work. He asked my grandmother to also register herself. My mother is a Manolo, is an indigenous person, to also register herself at 24 hectare land. So together they got 48 hectares land. They opened this up to Moro and Luman, but with a great discrepancy. If you're Luman, if you're an indigenous person, if you're Moro, you can only apply a maximum of 10 hectares, not more. It's the rest of the land is the policy is earmarked for those who are committed to Mindanao. It's just that my lolo married my grandmother, and she somehow became a migrant by default due to that kind of marriage. If you're a corporation, it's 1,024 hectares again. By 1936, this is already the Commonwealth government. This was already the government led by President Quezon at the time. They again reconstituted the land policy. They lowered down the 24 hectares. By the way, the 24 hectares, if you're familiar with it, I think some of the lands in Luzon were titled under the homestead early on. That is a homestead titling. Later on, they lowered that homestead title to 16 hectares, and they also lowered lands allowable for distribution to Moro and Luman to 4 hectares and continued with consistency the land that could be offered to the corporations. So this is the kind of policy that somehow altered the relationships of land tenure in Mindanao against the backdrop of the photograph that I showed you earlier on, the atrocity, the massacre of people in Mindanao. It's a double whammy in a sense. With all these land laws, this is where the migrants in Mindanao went, coming from Luzon and Visayas. Many of them concentrated in Tawi-Tawi, Basilan, a few in Cebu, but largely in an area that we would now consider as Central Mindanao and what they would call as Soc Sargent, South Cotabato, Sarangani, General Santos, North Cotabato area, that region over there. And those are also the region that is quite complicated right now. That is often being visited or being complicated by conflicts here and there. From bombings to shootings to actual military occupation to ambushes to whatever violence you can think of. These areas are the most violent. This is also the areas where many of the moral constituency had been in the past. And this is where the 24 versus 10 hectares, 24 for migrants, 10 hectares for Moro and Yuman, the 16 for migrant and 4 hectares for Moro and Yuman were situated in those areas. So you can just, if you are from that place, first of all, you live in that land, you are from generation to generation, there were tales, there were myths, there were stories, there were family legends that were told again and again, and suddenly the local government comes and say that all those legends, all those myths doesn't hold any water until you can show a piece of paper. And they cannot show a piece of paper because in the first place, they are not allowed to register. And if they can register, and when they were finally allowed to, they were given a smaller amount of land compared to the migrants who came. So just imagine the kind of resentment that you would have if you were in that place, if you were in that shoes, if you were the Moro or Yuman constituency, and you see new people arriving, strangers arriving with bigger lands than you can ever have because by law you're not allowed to get bigger land. That's the kind of resentment that is brewing in this area, and that kind of a situation is captured in this population report by in various census dating that was done. In 1903, just as about the time, 1902 was the period when the Public Lands Act was enacted all across the country. 1903 was the period wherein they began to issue land titles. And this is how the population has shifted. 1903, the total population of Mindanao was about 898, 668 people. The Christianized population, there's a Christian population, is 332,000. And the Moro and Yuman is 566 and 404,000. So the Moro and Yuman is the majority of people in Mindanao. This is where Duterte and the rest of Moro advocates are coming from, and they say that Mindanao was ours, it was never was a Christian land. This is where it was coming from. But by 1918, there's somehow a reconfiguration in terms of the occupancy of Mindanao. This is already the period wherein more land titles were bigger land holdings and more land titles were issued to migrating Christians from Visayas and the North, including my grandfather, who had reached that area in about this period, 1918 to 1920s. The flow of migrants had bloated the Christian population to 501,000 as against 564,000 for Moro and Yuman. So the distinction is that was that 63% were the population for Moro and Yuman in 1903, 37% for Christian population. That shifted to almost at par, almost 50-50 by 1919. And the complicating story is that by 1948, 1960, 1970, 1990, the shift was already very, very sharp. Moro was only 26% in terms of population. Settlers or Christians from the north was 74%. Uh, at least in the 1940s, 1970s, by this time around, as we speak, the shift is 20% and 81%. That was brought about by institutional arrangement, by structures established by our land laws and our migration policies. That was started during the colonial government and was continued all across through the post-colonial governments, post-independent Philippines in 1948, 1960s, 1970s, 1990, and 2000s. So that's the land story in Mindanao. So the effect of this is this. More communities and Lumad felt that they were dislocated and it was an injustice. It was unfair. They had no fighting chance for that kind of an arrangement. It led to the resentment that I was telling you about. And that resentment turned into tension, and tension into conflict, into fighting, into intrigues, into, hey, that is our land, why are you occupying it? Into a sharp reaction. And that led to some burning of the houses and the formation of militia groups. And the sad story, an additional sad story of this is that some politicians at the time had rode on to this crest, this wave of resentment, this wave of tension to advance their political career. And among them are these guys. That will for the Muslim side. Well, they were fighting for Muslim rights, but at the same time they were fighting as they advanced their political career. They were still regarded as heroes of the Muslim communities because they had articulated the problem of the Muslim people that I was saying earlier, that migration policies. But at the same time, as they do so, they have also advanced their political influence and interest. On the Christian side, Anthony Digina, Bukay Manero was featured in that movie, Horror Novice. I don't know if you watched that. He was this guy who was accused in the 1970s of shooting a PIMB priest, an Italian, on the head and then eating the face out. Because he thought that the priest was sympathizing with all people who and communists. It was that guy. But he said that he has reformed now and if he had. And he's no longer involved with this. But these are the kind of situation that we had. I'm mentioning tensions. I'm going to show you a short video clip on how the tension might look like on the ground. This is a recent tension, but the 60s and the 70s would have this kind of tensions and sentiments, at least from the Christian side, based on a documentary done by a journalist. His name is Ed. This is how it goes.
In the last few days, despite or maybe even because of the peace talks in the United, tensions appear to have been rising in the villages in North Cotabato. Some say that it may have something to do with the peace talks, others say that it may have something to do with the armed elections. But in the end, it simply is about land. Some claim ancestral rights, others claim legal rights. A few days ago, rebels burned this 10-hectare cane field and shot dead the mother of the civilian volunteer. Rebels took over several barangays in North Cotabato, taking cattle and crops, burning houses and fields.
Yung sa mga yan, wala na ang bakit pinagkatay. Kami na lang. Kayo po, kayo yun. Ang dahil sino? Sunod talaga. Pati yung mga kami na rin, umot. It all started with sniping, and then syempre itong mga villagers gaganti, and then ganti na naman yung kabila.
Memories run wrong in this land, and hatreds run deep. In the 70s, Christian Lagras fought bitter battles with Moro Blackshirts, the classic battle between settlers and natives. But a lot of demographics have changed since then. Christian settlers are now the majority here. Born in 1972, the town of Palyosa is relatively new. It's named a contraction of the old hometowns of its local settlers, Alibujan, Leon, and San Juan. So when government tried to sign a pact with rebels ancestral voting rights over large sections of Mindanao, the government will deal with no fears while failing to answer an age-old question. by those who settled it first or those who settled it last.
Sabi ko nga sa mga tao ito, at sila yung mismo nagsabi sa akin, kung talagang kasama tayo doon, baka na magyari kung gira-girahan natin yan.
When darkness falls, Alyosan again becomes a ghost town, manned only by aging civilian volunteers clutching even older guns.
Pagkakita ko talagang parang ghost barangay, wala ka makita ng naglalakad, tumitak mo na dahil, kundi talagang walang tao na talagala.
In this detachment in Pagulibas, Alyosan, a squad of sexagenarians mans the fort. Mang Joe is 64, Mang Eri is 63, Mang Rogelio 56. Each one suddenly remembers a more violent youth.
Umpisa na gumawa hanggang ngayon. Sama-sama na kami dito.
But it is in the situation now carries the burdens of the past. As Kabaya says, some of the Ilocos rebels are his old neighbors, even friends. Now, across the fighting line, they spoke in English.
Yung ibang mga commander, identified commander, kakilala ko sa iba, kaklase ko noon ng elementary noon. Magkakalaro ng mga anak namin eh. Katulad namin doon na noon na maliit pa kami, nalaro rin. Tapos may mga sports activities, sama-sama rin kami, basketball nga, saan kami pumunta. Minsan, tumawag na cellphone sa akin na kumusta daw, mag-iingat daw. Sabi ko, kayo din, kumusta, mag-iingat din kayo.
Someday, Mang Ted knows they will meet again in a time of peace. And those when the time comes, they can keep the peace and keep their friendships as well.
Sabi ko, pagdating na araw na magka-baseball, umikita pa rin tayo, nakakayaan din ginawa niyo mong kaibigan tayo.
From the front lines, and we go.
So those are the children of the migrants who were enamored to come over to Mindanao. They were either children when they joined their parents to go to the land of promise, or they were born in Mindanao. They started well, establishing friendship with the locals, mainly Muslims and Moro. But then, as more and more migrants have come, and more migrants have expanded their land holding, because the law allowed them to expand the land holding and hold down the land holdings of tomorrow, that triggered the resentment. So they were friends before, but as they grew old, they were fighting for how many years? 20, 30, others already gone 50, 60 years old, and they were fighting their buddies, their bosom friends, their young partners in the old days, in the Cadunay. Now, another complication that was spawned by those policies is that this consciousness, the idea that it was unfair, it was injustice to the Moro people, had turned into a kind of a consciousness, a kind of an awakening that, hey, it was a systemic policy that had eased them out from many of the lands that they occupied. And so therefore they thought that they had to, or the Moro people had to assert that they are one people, they have an identity, they have it was their land, and they should be heard by the government. But then again, something happened in the 1970s, just like the early photograph that I showed you on Mindanao. In 1968, amidst this awakening, amid this white rising consciousness among the Moro constituency that we were victims of injustices. There was an operation that was reportedly, at least a Senate investigation at the time, led by Senator Benito Aquino Jr. Sr., indicated that Marcos was planning to attack one region in Malaysia, particularly the area of what we would call now Sabah. And they think that the Philippines has, Marcos at least thought that the Philippines has a legitimate claim to Sabah because it was part of the Sulu Sultanate. And he organized some kind of a secret mission to come over to penetrate the area. And supposedly, according to Senate investigations, although it wasn't really not proven, part of the records of the Senate, that the strategy was for a group of Muslims, particularly Catholic from Sulu, to be trained by the military in a military fashion, and that this mission after the military training was to sow violence, intrigues, confusions, bombings, and any other kind of hatred into Sabah. So when Sabah breaks down and fight against each other, then a Philippine military invasion will begin. That the Philippines is going to take that land because Sabah had to be reordered. Sabah had to be well, at least the uprising in Sabah. But instead of carrying out that mission, there was a mutiny, especially from among the Muslim recruit, the Muslim trainees in the plan. Many stories were said. One information, one story was that they were complaining about food, they were complaining about the salary, they were complaining about the strictness of the officer, that they were not given any freedom to move around. And the other report was that they learned of the plan to penetrate Sabah and to kill fellow Muslims. And they vowed, and they protested against this plan. So they mutinied. They confronted their officers. So instead of the officers supposedly, reportedly answering and addressing their concern, the officers killed them all, except for one who reportedly survived by swimming onto Manila Bay. By the way, this happened in Corridor, that is where Corridor Island off the coast of Manila Bay. That was where the training was. And so he swam into the murky waters of Manila Bay and was able to reach Cavite and told this story before the Senate investigation led by Billy Joaquin Sr. at the time. And coupled with the sensational story of the Jamila massacre, as they would call it, the Jamila massacre, this killing, and the kind of migration policies and dispossession, dislocation, sentiments on the ground in Mindanao, an idea that we probably are really different people. We are not part of the Philippine nation. Why have they treated us this way? In terms of land holding, we can only go as far as 10, and from 10, we were given reduced support. More lands were offered for the Christians and less land for the Muslims. So we are really second-class citizens in this country. So why not assert our identity? Not only assert our identity, but why not go away and split from the Philippines? Because the national government is not exactly addressing our welfare. In fact, it has been doing injustice and injustice on us. That kind of an awakening. And many of them went back and looked back to this day, and among the most prominent and the most charismatic at the time, articulate among the Moro constituency is this person, Nur Miswari, who was finished at UPB naman, I think, top there, as well as in some other universities in Manila. So he was a leading intellectual at the time. He articulated the moral problem. He articulated what I just said, that this was an injustice. The Philippine government is not taking care of the welfare of the Moro people. Not only that they're not taking care of, but they don't consider the Moro people as part of the moral of the Philippine nation. So why speaking out with the Philippine nation? And so he led a war of independence by establishing the Moro National Liberation Front. And they articulated this idea that we are different people, we are not Filipinos, and we were never Filipinos, we are Moro, and we must have a nation of our own. And so therefore, they revisited the language of Southeast Asia, the Malayan understanding, the Malay understanding of what constitutes a nation, what constitutes a people. So they went back to the Malay notion of Bangsa, meaning nation, Bansa, Tagalog. And they all together this idea that they are a nation, the Moro is a nation, and fuse together this notion that Moro is a nation is Bangsa in Malay, so therefore they are Bangsamoro. So they articulated a identity, not as Filipinos, but as Bangsamoro, who has a territory that was taken away from them by the majority of Filipinos. And cleverly, because this is a group of intellectuals steeped in the training of history, steeped in the training of, shall we say, politics, they revisited the many other events in Philippine history, going back to Leonard Wood and going back to this bill that was filed in 1922 at the U.S. Congress, that the Philippines ought to revisit to be, the Mindanao ought to be separated from the rest of the Philippines because there's always tensions between Christian and Muslim. And as a proof that, as they were saying, that Muslims and Christians cannot really go along and come along together because of what happened in the past. So it went on and went on, and this was again articulated in the attack on Zamboanga, if you can still remember that, just a few years ago, 2015. Okay, that was the achievement of the Moro secessionist movement. So there was Moro identity that was first established. There was a Moro movement that was created, and there was a secessionist struggle that was formed, and they fought against the government. But in the process of fighting against the government, something happened with the Moro movement. It has gone into confrontation in so many ways. They were successful in 1960s, 1968, 1970s, early 1970s. They attacked towns, and in fact, General Ferdinand Hawat, who had become, I think, an ANP chief, and had been assigned to Mindanao during this time, had written actually a book saying that, but the title of the book is The Day We Almost Lost Mindanao. And in fact, the Philippines had really almost, the military was nearly defeated in the battlefields against the forces of this party. But along with the successes of the MNLF, Moro National Liberation Front, was also the complication. As they grew successful, they were infighting, and that infighting led to a fragmentation. Let's look at how the fragmentation of these groups had come about. Because these are the impact on how we could appreciate not only the complexity, but also the difficulty of settling the armed conflicts in Mindanao and in addressing the current welfare conditions of the communities. So, it all started in 1968 with the Mindanao Independence Movement. This is where the consciousness was articulated that the Moro people are not Filipinos, but Bangsamoro. And so therefore, should demand independence from the Philippines. This was joined by those politicians that I had showed, the pictures I showed a while ago. It was actually led by a governor of Cotabato named Tumutala. He was the head of that. But then, in its success, the young guns led by Biswari were not really contented with the leadership of the politicians. They want a new leadership that is just Bangsamoro. Okay, they were not contented, and they fought against the leadership and formed the Moro National Liberation Front. Also during that period, so they went out of the independence movement. But then the Moro community, I noted early on that while there's one big Moro chunk or group of population called Moro groups, there are also a number of ethno-linguistic groups under the Moro people. And in these Moro ethno-linguistic groups are different political interests and political, shall we say, authority. At least the groups in that area in Mindanao, the Lanao, the Sur, the Norte area, had formed their own liberation movement and called it the Bangsamoro Liberation Organization, coming again from the heat of the Mindanao independence movement. Through time, there was a huge split or tension within the Moro National Liberation Front, particularly between Nur Biswari, who chaired the organization at the time, versus his vice chairman, whose name is Hashim Salamat. They were not really in seeing eye to eye on how to go about moving forward with the Moro struggle. And Hashim Salamat in 1978, 1979 up and formed the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. In 1986, another group had moved away from the Bangsa Moro Liberation Organization and moved away from the Moro National Liberation Front, got the different members of these two organizations to form the Islamic Command Council in Mindanao. So you didn't hear much of this because they didn't really thrive as successfully as MILF or the MNLF is or has been. And by the 1990s, in Sulu, which you keep on hearing from the news, some members of the MNLF splintered and formed the Abu Sayyaf, and from there on has recruited their own, not coming from the Abu Sayyaf, but coming from the new generation of Muslim youths, at least in these islands in Sulu and Basilan. In the year 2000s, the Moro National Liberation Front that was already racked by factions, again splintered, again was factionalized into two by a new vice chairman who was not seeing eye to eye with his party this time. And so they formed another faction of the MNLF during that period. And recently, after, in 2012, an organization had moved away from the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and formed Bangsa Moro Islamic Freedom Fighters. So that's how it's split. And this splitting has a huge consequence and impact on how we put our shape, and as well as begin to empathize with the problems of people who want to achieve peace given the splintering of and complicated entire situation. Now, just to analyze what's going on, just for us to have a good handle of what's going on, I'm using some of analytical models in understanding what had happened within these formations. This comes from the different studies of secessionist movements, not just in the Philippines, but also in Africa, other parts of Southeast Asia, and South America. Normally, the central government deals with secessionist forces in two ways. Either to keep on fighting the government, as what we have done, keep on fighting the secessionists, the rebels, as what we have been doing in the past 48 years, to the tune of 73 billion and 75% of our armed forces, or through peace negotiations. These are the two ways in which rebellion is being addressed. Uniformity all across in many other parts of the country. So it's peace negotiations as well as development programs. But in truth, this is the simplistic understanding of what's going on in many of secessionist movements in the world. Accordingly, our literature indicates that all across, whether in our situation, the condition in Mindanao, or the condition in Africa and in other parts where there are secessionist movements, when the government deals with one secessionist group, it would only be a matter of time when that secessionist group would either break out or new secessionist forces would also come into play. If not a secessionist force, there would be other politically interested groups who would also try to seek, shall we say, a space by which they could negotiate or demand their own political interests to the government. This is just how it works, and this is a comparative view of how secessionist forces works, and that is how we can appreciate what's going on. Our experience is not different from experiences of countries that have been dealing with violent secessionist forces in the past 30, 40, or 50 years. We are into that mode. We're just consistent. In many ways, in many other parts of the world, just like our government, we've been dealing with, the central government has been dealing with multiple secessionist forces, both in peace and war. Exactly what goes on in our context. I tracked that, applied this literature, this model, and simulated that in our division. So here's the Philippine government. It has dealt first with the Mindanao independence movement. It successfully dealt with the Mindanao independence movement by granting some positions to the leader of the MIM, if you call it. The governor of Tumatalan, the picture that I showed earlier on, I think was appointed as peace advisor by Ferdinand Marcos in 1975. But as Marcos has succeeded in, shall we say, buying peace from the leaders of the MIM, other members of the MIM were not happy with that. So they split up and formed many other groups. And government had fought against them. And the government realized that they cannot really just win the war just by fighting against the MNLF. They thought that they should, before that, the MNLF also split up and had formed the MNLF, and the government had dealt with the MILF. So the government had dealt with the MNLF until it split up. There was a negotiation between the government and the MNLF in 1976. And they called that, there was actually an agreement, a peace agreement. They call it the 1976 Tripoli Peace Agreement. It is from there that MNLF had split into an MILF. And the rest is history. In 1996, as the 1995, 94, 95, 96, as the government was negotiating with the MNLF, it broke again and established an Islamic Command Council. And as they were successful in the implementation of the peace agreement, it broke again into another faction. And the MILF in 2012, when we have the comprehensive agreement of the banks of Forward, it broke again and formed the IFF. So it fitted onto that broader scenario of understanding of secessionist politics and secessionist movements. We are not alone in this. It's just how it works. And this is where patience really required of us, understanding how we can think. I will go on that a little bit more later on. But this is the complexity that we're dealing with, and the complexity is not just a unique Philippine experience, but an experience of many other studies of secessionist movements. Okay. Now, there's another actor, there's another group, an agent that is playing all this. I noted that in the previous slides, all those tables of how the migration patterns have shifted. It's more to find that we're marginalized. So far, I've been talking about tomorrow. Now, I will dwell a little bit on Lumad. Lumads are indigenous peoples that come to Tubo, at least for our context in the Luzon area. And this is how scattered Lumads in Mindanao are. There are at least 33 groups of people who consider themselves as Lumad or indigenous peoples. And this is growing. This was only about 2218 in 1986. It has grown to 33. Some of them said, we were not listed in that 18 in 1986. There are more with an identities that were not listed. Others, they split up from the bigger identity and form their own identity. But it's just the nature of identity. It's just movements of so many other groupings. But this is how spread they are across Mindanao. Now, I showed you this earlier. These are places where the all armed forces are based. And those areas that I showed you, the dark areas, the brownish dark areas that I noted there, are areas where there are pockets or spots of Lumad communities. So if you can see in this map, Lumad community sits next or right, or at least we're part of the landscape of the Moro secessionist movement. But not only the Moro secessionist movement, but also of the New People's Army, the CPN, particularly in the eastern part of Mindanao. So it's a little bit complicated in the sense that we have the Moro Liberation Front on one end, and there's also the NPA on another end. So that's the kind of situation or conditions that is conforming to indigenous peoples a little bit different from the Moro communities. The Moro communities were already marginalized, and this is a community that is, I'm not so sure it's correct to say it's twice marginalized, but it is being fought by, as they say in English, caught between a hard place, within a rock and a hard place. Exactly the kind of case that we are having. Now, because of this, Lumad communities in Mindanao had also established their own movement. They started in the 1980s by aligning 18 ethno-linguistic groups to organize a broad-based indigenous peoples movement in Mindanao, wherein they adopted the term Lumad. So Lumad is not exactly a very old term. In fact, it's not an indigenous term in Mindanao. It's a Bisaya term. Lumad presupposes a person who's come from a place, who stays to the place, that is a significant place, and is very much rooted and will continue to be rooted. At least Bisaya. So they adopted that. Why didn't they adopt Bisaya word? Because these are 18 ethno-linguistic groups. There are 18 languages that is not mutually understandable to each other. But because the Bisaya, the settlers coming from Visayas, is the most dominant among the settlers that come to Mindanao, more dominant than the Tagalog, the Bicolano, all the rest. Almost everyone in Mindanao can speak Bisaya. Not all, almost everyone. And so therefore, they adopted the Bisaya term as their common identity. Because they don't have one language to bind them together. But Lumad became a political identity. As a political identity, it became their way of articulating, hey, we are one big group of people that also have an agenda to articulate. So now they've been a participant, I think some of you knows this, in the passage or in the fight as well as in the passage of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997. And this law is quite significant in the context of how solutions to Mindanao should be addressed or are being complicated at the moment. I'll tell you more about that. Now, what's the state of the indigenous peoples today? If you can recall the previous map, they are caught in between different armed groups. And due to that situation, this map that I'm showing you is a map that was crafted, that was drawn by some of my informants, my friends who are informants, when we together tracked where are the areas that had became the site of all those armed confrontations involving MILF, MNLF, and NPA, at least in the North Cotabato area. And these are the sites of conflicts. All those white spots are all sites of conflicts that you can, that had embodied or that had involved in their areas. And so therefore, they have been dealing with military operations and were displaced by military operations, especially when that military operations lead into violent fightings between the communist movement, communist armed groups, and secessionist armed groups. Not only that, not just that they were caught in the war, they were also, their ranks were also the prime targets for recruitment, both by, not only but by almost all of these forces. By the military, they're being recruited to become outposts or militias for the military, the CPOs. And for the MILF and MNLF to become members of the MNLF and MILF. And by the NPA, they were all recruited into these groups. So they're not just running away, they also have to deal with the recruitment. They're also joining the armed groups. They are being taken from them, leading to displacement, dislocation, dispossession, marginalization, and stark abuses in terms of their rights and responsibilities. Recently, at least very recently in the past 2-3 years, there have been a series of extrajudicial killings that involve or that victimize primarily Lumads. At least in 2015, as of September, about 35 Lumad leaders had been killed. 10 of them were allegedly initiated, or allegedly committed by the Philippine military, and 8 of them were allegedly committed by the NPA. And in the past, in the 1970s, the MNLF, the MILF were also accused by the Lumads of killing their fellows as well in the course of the prosecution of the secessionist war and in the communist insurgency. Okay, a few minutes. Why all the blood? Why all the displacement? What is driving this conflict and what's the condition of the ground? How does it look like? I'll just run you through a few, shall we say, figures coming from the Philippine Statistical Authority. It shows, this will give us a good idea, a good sense of what's going on in the ground, how the war has impacted or has implicated the social conditions, the welfare, the mindset, and the daily lives of the people in the conflict areas, particularly in areas that we would now fall as autonomous regions in Mindanao. It also includes both Muslims and Muns. This will also give us an insight not only of the impact of the war, but also on what is driving people to keep on joining the armed groups and to keep on fighting against the government. What is driving the people to keep defying what is facing them, what is in store of them. And this is how it goes. This comes from the Philippine Statistical Authority. 48% of the people, of the population of autonomous region of Mindanao, which is I think about 5-6 million, don't have has access to clean and safe water. 51% or 52% doesn't have any access to clean water. They don't have potable water. No water is flowing into their household. So that's more than half of the population, and that is pretty bad. That was no access to water, and this is the neglected provinces. The provinces with very, very poor access, not only 50% doesn't have access, or have access. In Tawi-Tawi, only 11% of the population, Tawi-Tawi is part of ARNF, only 11% of the population have access to potable water, meaning 79% do not have any access to clean water. Lanao del Sur also had a poor record, better than Tawi-Tawi. Only 30% of the population have access to clean water. But at least in this specific area, alongside other places in the Philippines also had bad access to water, but the lowest among all these provinces are located at the autonomous region of Mindanao. And look at the figures in Batanes, Aurora, Pampanga, and Oriental Mindoro, all parts of Luzon. All parts of Luzon. It's 100 to 99%. It's almost like the migration pattern all over again. 24 hectares for Christians, only 10 or 10 hectares for Muslims, 16 hectares for Christians, only 4 hectares for Muslims and 5. And it also goes, the pattern to be tracked, it's almost also the same on the services that are provided. Circa 1999 data, 1999, it continues to be so in 2016. So nothing almost changed from the 1900s to now. In terms of iron supplements, there's a huge discrepancy on the mother's health. Basilan are at the bottom, the bottom of communities and population without access, with big discrepancy, with poor access to iron supplements. Meaning, health services are not reaching the mothers who needed, the women who needed iron supplement, especially if they're pregnant or lactating. Iron deficiency in Lanao del Sur, as a type of is near, which is also a Muslim area, though not the majority, but at least a Muslim area, only have access or only had a good record on iodine deficiency in terms of 20% of the women population, 19 and 18%. That's a very low level of access to iodine supplement. In terms of tetanus, the mothers here would probably know that you would have to be injected with a tetanus vaccine when you give birth or about to give birth. This after birth. This is the access for Cebu. Only 70.5% of mothers have been granted were injected with an anti-tetanus vaccine. That's quite poor. Maguindanao, Maguindanao, Basilan, and other parts, Lanao del Sur and other parts of the area were not included here. My suspicion was that it was because of poor data, or there's almost no data at all. There's almost negligible access to tetanus, anti-tetanus intervention for the mothers. In the context of family planning, Mindanao, Lanao del Sur, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi, Basilan, all 5 provinces of Lanao of the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao are at the bottom of family planning services. And the sanitation gap is also very, very stark. While much of Luzon and the richer area in the country had almost 100% sanitation intervention, the areas in Maguindanao, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi are almost without sanitation services. In terms of land tenure, meaning ownership to land, this is quite stark. AMM is no longer listed because my suspicion is that there's no clear land tenure security, meaning much of the communities in this area may not be able to land for them to be on. They're no longer listed as provinces with clear tenure on land, meaning ownership of land. In terms of housing, Sulu has the poorest material of housing. And this doesn't include Maguindanao, Lanao del Sur, which in actuality also have very, very poor material in terms of housing. Their housing can be flicked by the weakness of the wind or by elements that comes along. They're no longer listed because it's really quite poor. And in terms of employment, the gap is stark. Sulu, Basilan, Tawi-Tawi, the area that was no longer listed in either top or bottom. The probable reason for this, they're no longer entered into the database. The probable reason for this is that there's not much employment at all. Almost negligible, almost zero. Because they're not in the statistics anymore. In terms of children employment, children who are employed, nothing again for children in the ARM. It's bad that children are being employed, but even the children in the ARM areas would not be employed because there's just no employment to begin with. In terms of education, and this is critical fast, elementary education, Sulu, Basilan, and Lanao del Sur. There are still many communities that doesn't have any access to elementary education. I've done a study in 2009 on access to elementary education in the Mindanao area. Most of the richer areas, even Luzon and Visayas, I think almost all barangays already have an elementary school. But when you look at the statistics in Sulu and other parts of the area, barangays after barangays doesn't have a school. So this is the classic story of children who have to walk 3, 4, 5 kilometers to get to the nearest school because their own barangay doesn't have a school. And so therefore, they don't go to school anymore because they cannot walk 5, 6, or 7 kilometers every day just to get to school. So that's how poor the access is. High school is even more problematic. Only about it's no longer listed here. The statistics that I've seen from left end, barangay after barangay, Sulu, Basilan, and Tawi-Tawi just don't have any high school. There are a few more elementary schools, but almost nothing in high school. And in fact, it must have been that in one town there can only be one high school in many of these areas. Or some other towns that not even have a high school. I've been doing a study recently on of Islam in Mindanao. Part of our studies is to count how many barangays are there and how many mosques are spread out here in the school. There are no schools, there are no health facilities, there are no elementary or high schools that is found. The only institution, the only building that they could grant to at least for some semblance of education, some semblance of language is a mosque. There are about 900 barangays plus in Cebu, Basilan, Tantay, and there are about 2,500 mosques or 3,000. So meaning there are about 3 or 4 mosques in a barangay because that's the only access to knowledge that the people can go to because government is there, at least religion is there. It's just that the mosque will provide education, all they can offer is the way to save souls. Hopefully so. Civil society, like organizations of parents, organizations or any other civil organizations are almost non-existent in many parts of the RMM. In Cebu, at least in the record, it's 2.7%. That's the only number of civic institutions. So that's the kind of the social landscape that we are seeing. We have migration patterns that was quite poor, that have spawned violence, and we have very, very poor welfare conditions, services conditions in many parts of the area inhabited by both Muslims and whites. Now, all these problems is not the end of it. There are few other layers of problems that stand or that can be opened up onto the migration patterns, onto the conflicts that we have seen into the wars, and onto these social welfare issues. And that is these other layers of violence sitting on welfare issues or underneath the armed conflicts, the large armed conflicts that we are seeing between secessionist movements and the communists and the military. And this is the complexity of the militia armed violence. There's no school to go, there's not much to do, there's no healthcare that takes care of them. Joining a militia, joining an armed group is actually the only option that they can go to make themselves a little bit more productive. So across many of these lands, there were militia organizations. And you have that conditions of fighting over land, and you have that condition of lack of access to education and so on and so forth. All of these conditions have led to this kind of situation. They're recruited into either a militia forces, into the military as agents, into the MILF, or into the armed forces. And again, I'll bring another documentary by Ph.D. Jowel, a continuation of the documentary that I showed you, just to get a sense of what's going on in the ground when they join the militia movements.
Ang labas namin dito, maapi, hindi pwede. Lalaban kami hanggat may buhay.
Si Manuel Lopez ang tinatawag na batalang commander ng mga CDO sa Barangay Magpuro.
Gusto na kayo maapi niya. Kung gusto nilang malawak naman yung ano dyan, lupain nila, bakit hindi sila magtanim? Mga tahan kasi, marami na magyari sa mga kira-kira. Wala na tayo na
Malalim ang mga emosyon dito dahil malalim ang mga sugat. Nung sumikap ang digmaan noong dekada 70, nandito ang front lines at mga sibilyan na pumunta para labanan ng mga rebelde Muslim na gustong bumaklas sa Pilipinas. Pero ito raw ang nakaraan. Sabi ngayon ng Moro Islamic Liberation Front, matagal na nitong binitawan ang idea ng independence.
Hindi pinag-usapan ito yung hindi pinag-usapan ng marxism. Hindi pinag-usapan. Siguro sa amin ng mga anticipation, central government. Kaya, bangsa ng nandun pa rin central government. Nandun ang basic. So, hindi independence.
Ang patay ngayon ng MILF, hindi independent kundi federated state. Parang California o Texas sa US, na bahagi ng isang federasyon na may sariling batas at konstitusyon.
Ano ito ang patakong
yes, they're no longer fighting for it. But the forces on the ground continues to fight, despite the statements that are being said before the public space in the international sphere. It's not that they are not sincere in the talks. It's just that the layers of problems that I already showed you had spawned several other constituencies. And these constituencies also have a mind on their own. They act on their own and they do something. And because the conditions of unpeace, meaning welfare, the armed groups are still on the ground, they had the condition for clashing, the condition for fighting continues. So, no matter how much success is being gained in the national sphere. And not only that, most of this fighting interplays, the militia fight interplays with the secessionist fighting. And one by which that interplays, so one by which the fighting between the secessionist forces and the government, as well as the militias, are coming into play, is seen in this phenomenon called Rido, or clan feuding, or kindred family feuding. It's a feud that involves two families quite violently, because most of the families in many parts of the conflict areas are well armed, since they're part of the militias to begin with. They're part of either MILF or the agents of the military. They have the resources of war at their disposal. And many of them are also quite, shall we say, linked to the powers between the politicians as well as the armed group. I'm going to show you a video of Rido in Sulu and how this Rido had been difficult to control by government forces and even by the MNLF on the ground, no matter how much they try. Along the way, people on the ground, Muslim versus Muslim, Christian versus Muslim, Christian versus Christians, we're all fighting. At least in Sulu, it's Muslim versus Muslim. We're all militias, we're all armed with military resources to keep their hands on, fighting against each other in this warfare called Rido, on top or below the secessionist fighting that that I have already talked to you about. And this is how it goes.
The Sioux archipelago in the southern Philippines has been the target of the U.S.-assisted counterinsurgency program since 2003, where American troops have helped rout the Abu Sayyaf rebel group. Dubbed America's second front against terrorism, Sulu has been hailed as a success, but it remains a very dangerous place. Heavily armed rival clans have created an environment of ongoing violence. These conflicts have little to do with radical Islam, it's local politics through the barrel of a gun.
This is American arm, 45.
I am Police Senior Superintendent Julasirem Anikasi, the acting police director of Sulu. And if you ask me why I'm here, as being entrusted the position of provincial director, it is my obligation to serve and protect the community. Apart from about 30 years in the service and serving for about 20 years, this is not the only conflict that I have come in. For me, in Sulu, it is sedation, customary sedation. That's the on firearms for protection for police, like cell phone, yes. It is that of symbol because yung tulo, pag lalaki, di on sarang. Pag babae, di unggol. Well, because there is no way. So, some of them, although they are only, most of them are only relative, can be divided. The other group going to the other group, the other one, the other side. It's relative funds.
Basta kami. Huling sila pa mo. Kita niyo, kung tutukunin siya mami at ibuklaw, sinasawa ilan di kuana. In kami mo parte, mga hari, sinpaksipay. Ay, di ba kayo ba ilang saan? Kami na lang natin. Ikagay maging edit. Basta mo na ulit. Nari, hanggang nakasyon yun, pinapasindi, pahasyon, yan, nakuraan yung yakan lukman, tapos, pag maawot, mga sakto, lumatahan yaw, pag nakauliway na yun, pagkarimak, at pagpasakto ko yung sinapang, ang napagpapinsinan ka mo, way kami siya, tikin ka. Kaya nato yung dam. Banyan, maritema kayo, tatapos takot kayo. At ako yung lukan kong mga mukubisin nyo.
Uncommon here that plants will have and use mortars, RPGs, heavy weapons on each other. Many conflicts in the world, insurgencies don't have that type of firepower that a clan will have here. So certainly the police, even if they had the proper resources, would find it hard to exert the rule of law in many of the areas.
Zero team daw ang team natin. Lumalaban lang kami sa katotohanan, ganun lang. Katotohanan lang pinaglalaban namin. Walang ibang pinaglalaban namin.
Most people, when they talk about insecurity, it's insecurity of a fellow clan. From armed numbers of rivals, that's where people's number one threat comes from, whether they be in the police, whether they be in the military, the local government, even on the other side. The number one enemy, chances are, is the rival clan.
The children cannot go to school anymore. And the fishermen cannot go out and catch fish because our enemies are chasing them away and shooting at them.
Hinahabol na ng mga kalaban namin dito. Binabaril.
It's like you cannot concentrate on your daily work anymore. We are afraid because our enemies are just there on the other side. If we didn't have these guns now, we'd probably be all dead by now.
Many of these areas, there's no civil leaders that are present. So naturally, when there is a dispute between a family or within a family or between clans and people are armed, are they going to use those weapons or at least threaten to use them? And without rule of law, there is a propensity for these conflicts to escalate. And what happens is, to make it even more complicated, is that the insurgencies, the war on terror, it all gets mixed up into that.
So that's the story of this problem. It's always up with insurgencies. Secession is all kinds of war. But it's no longer a secessionist war, but it's sitting underneath or above the secessionist war that drives along the conflict war that complicates it in many ways. Now, this last video I'm going to show you is that how personal this warfare can be, and involves convocation. This time around, this happened in the early 2000s, 2002, involving ones who are now in jail. This was before they were jailed. They were also a significant actor in the region in many parts of, and this is how it went in this documentary Refocusing.
Hindi na bago sa atin ang balita tungkol sa mga giyera sa Mindanao. Pero lingid sa ating kaalaman, may iba pang labanan dito na hindi kaya tutasin ng mga pisto ng gobyerno. So, siksikan mong gabay na yan, kaya yung regular na laban.
Dito kasi si Jerry at tapos ko naman yung for
Tapos ito pa si Martin.
oh, yan lang. Dulo lang talaga.
Dulo lang ang pama.
Dulo lang.
Nagbagilan ang mga pamilyang Adalin at ang Patuan dahil lang sa nagkatapakan ng paan. Tatlo ang patay. Kasama na si Hopper ang Patuan, anak ng kinatatakutang gobernador ng Mindanao.
Pero seconds lang talaga. 10 seconds, wala na.
Nagdalhin sa ospital ang mga sugatan, nagkita ang mga kamag-anak at nagbagilan ulit. Dalawang Adalin naman ang napatay dito, kasama ang padre ng pamilya, si Mario Adalin Sr. Ganyang kadaling mag-umpisa ang bigo sa Mindanao, alitan ng mga pamilyang nag-uurusan ng langit. Sa insidente ng ito, 5 ang namatay dahil sa tila wala namang kakwenta-kwenta ng bagay.
Hindi naman namin akalain kung kailan pa nagkaroon ng chosen people na i-invite. Doon pa nangyari, di ba?
Maski maraming nakasaksi sa mga pangyayari, walang naaresto ng pulis. Malakas sa politika ang mga ampatuan. Ang mga Adalin naman ay may mga kapamilya sa militar.
Ano, naniniwala ba kayo na tatahimik na sila? Tahimik na din sila.
Marami namang nang biglang nagpirmahan ng joint statement ang dalawang pamilya. Aksidente lang daw ang nangyari. Wala nang gaganti. Matagal na rin palang magkaibigan ng mga pamilyang Ampatuan at Adalin.
Talagang masakit para sa amin, masakit din para sa kanil. Na mangyari yung namang bagay na talagang disgrasya. Dahil magkakaibigan kami.
Ang kapatid ni Zalvi na si Saudi Ampatuan, alkalde naman ng Dagupian, ang nagpursige na magkaroon ng joint statement ang dalawang pamilya.
Dumating kami sa punto ng pagkakuminalisyon na just to see po na mag-clear yung tapos ng mga tao kung ano nang malabas sa mga radio na yung pamilya ng Batuan gusto mag-rebensa against ng mga nakapatikin ng pag and ganun na nalalit vice versa. So sa iba mga wala ng kapatid, ganun talaga okay sa situation, talagang disgrasya yung nangyari. Hindi namin kalaban ng mga Adalin, yung pagkaibigan namin.
Dinagdaan ang kasunduan noong December 24, pero hindi pa man natutuyo ang tinta sa papel. May sumabog na bomba sa Dagupian. 18 ang namatay, kasama na si Saudi Ampatuan. Mabilis na sinabi ng mga Ampatuan na walang kinalaman ng mga Adalin sa panibagong trahedya. Maraming label din sa Dagupian.
Maraming grupo. Away nag-away.
Ito yung tinalim.
Tawag natin. Katawan kalan. So, di ba? Wala pa. Ano mag-away o walkway.
Sa Dagupian mismo, tila nagsimula na ang gantihan. Bago kinalas ang bahay na ito, bigla na lang daw dinukot ang may-aring pinagbibintangang may kinalaman sa pagsabog. Kalaban mo. Nasaan siya ngayon?
Wala, patay na.
Sino pumatay?
Lucas Paul. Yung tawag ni Mayor.
Ano?
Yung tawag ni Mayor, pinatay na.
Pinatay siya?
Oo.
Kailan?
So that's how Guido is unfolding. Now, disgrasya, as sabi ang patulog, by the way, now in jail. But this is the kind of disgrasya that we're seeing. This is based on our study when the 2006, 2007, 2008. We tracked the different areas that are affected by Guido, and it pockmarked many parts of the region. And it's also sitting on top of the areas that have been sites of conflict. And these are the kind of causes that threat to the region. It's still land disputes, consistent to what drives the armed conflict, essentially conflict, election relations or related to elections, offenses on honor, when the person's foot was stepped on by the other person. I think what was offended there was the honor. This notion of there's a code called maratabat, and that is touched, then they have to fight back. So that's a cultural matter. And matters related to, shall we say, children who would elope, and the parents would want them to elope, and they would be separated. That would have violence consequences, especially when the separation happens. Or any other acts, wife beating, husband problems at home, sometimes led to offenses on marriage that turn into violent conflicts. But this is not the only thing that goes on with this. Based on my own study, this is what I noticed, primarily in the area where the Akatuans are. Normally, two members would be fighting. We thought that it's just a window. But in many cases that I documented, 5-6 cases that I documented in North Tabaco, Mindanao, and several areas, these two families who are fighting would look for another family whom they know that are also armed to help them with the conflict. And they would, some of them was connections to the local command of either the MILF or the MLF would also run after the MILF. In a few cases that I documented, some of the families have uncles or are themselves connected to the MNLF or MILF in the area. And normally the MNLF or MILF groups or forces would come and intervene in the conflict, siding with one family. The complication is if the other family is a member of CAF group or civilian volunteers organization, either Muslim or Christian. Because they go to a local politician. In Mindanao, they normally come to the Patuans or the local CDO. And the local CDO is normally controlled by the local politician. They mobilize them to support the family to fight against the other family who is now being supported by MILF or MNLF forces. If that is not enough, then they go to the local military command who sometimes send in tanks, airplanes, aircrafts that bombs out the areas cut in by the other members. How this happen? How does the military get involved into the conflict? Normally these families and the politicians and the CDO would say that we are under attack by the MNLF or by the MILF. And so the military should respond. In the olden days, the military don't know much about radio, so they just responded not knowing that it's actually a black conflict. They thought that it was the MILF attacking or the MNLF attacking them because it's true that the MILF had joined the fray. So therefore they also joined the fray, leading to what I would call as the interplay of secessionist conflict and this regional conflicts, complicating the situation in further. So this is another layer that we are seeking. Now I'm going through the last stages of the presentation of these two parts. Let's just look at what's going on now. I've been telling you reading hard stories after reading hard stories, literally blood on the screen. But there are also some games, and primarily on the peace processes front. But in those games, there were also several setbacks and complications. Let's just look at a few of them. In 1976, already noted early on, there was a peace agreement between the MNLF and the government that was revisited that led to the signing of what they would call a document called the final peace agreement between the government of the Philippines and the MNLF. So that was celebrated. But in 2002, the final peace agreement sort of has gone frayed, has hit some wall, especially after the forces of Burbiswari had seized a government center called the Kapatan complex in Zamboanga City. And MNLF became a wanted man. He flew to Malaysia. But then Malaysia established closer ties with the government. Malaysia authorities arrested him and sent him back to the Philippines, and he was jailed. And the government eventually was released, and he ran for an office. He was a governor, but he got lost. And he was disillusioned after a while. I'll just keep it with that. In 2013, Biswari forces, Biswari already a free man, and his forces were not really happy with what's going on in the final peace agreement. They thought that they were thinking that the government has been hedged in many of its commitment to the final peace agreement. Biswari has several points in there, and has several bases in saying that the government has actually been hedged, especially when an agreement between the MILF was formed. The government of the MLF, Biswari was part of the nation. So he was a little bit sad and was resented that move by the government, which led into the attack in Zamboanga in 2013. This is the attack that you may have been familiar of. It started with an MLF protest that led to this warfare on the streets, leading to the burning of these areas in Zamboanga. I've been working in these areas, researching that community from 2009 to 2010, and in 2013, that was burned down. Knowing some of the people there, I know that it's not an MNLF candidate because I frequent the cases that was burned down. And it was just a sad story. The MNLF used that attack. Now, this is how it is. The kind of situation that we are seeing on the ground. There are successful peace negotiations in 2007, 2003, 2008, and I think I will make a decision. What I meant to do here was that 1997, 2000, 2008, there were peace agreements. It led to crisis after crisis. This is the part that I was telling you about that. Whenever the government holds peace agreement with one group, another group would come up and surface their protests that led to some form of violence. It's unfortunate that lost. So the reality on the ground is that whenever the government would negotiate with one independence movement, new independence movement would come into play. This was the case in Tripoli Agreement. This was the case in the 1996 final agreement. This was the case in the 1997 agreement. By the way, when the peace agreement with the MNLF was key, there was a fighting on the ground when the soldiers attacked MILF and they would be suspected or hiding some kidnapping suspects in Mindanao. It led to a full-scale war and displacement of a lot of people. So on and so forth. This kind of a cycle has come to play. I already noted this before. And so therefore, the government is facing several angles. Each time they face several angles, they're going to want to with the complications of war, peace, complications of war. I won't spend much time more here with it. Just to highlight that our relationship is peace and war, but it's not fighting the same wars again and again. It's holding talking peace with different forces at one time or another because another complication will come up. Each time the government talks with one force or another, because it probably indicates that there are bigger problems that were not unresolved in this context, and these problems could be summed up into this. on the problem of community conflicts, anti-kidnapping conflict, and the land conflict. Those are among the problems that were very much the problem. Now, the recurrent conflicts in many of the majority Muslim or majority Christian towns had led into tense relations between Muslim and Christians and between Muslims and Muslims. And that it was a very indicated mutual relations. All these things that I already narrated earlier on had somewhat cultivated deep-seated civilian frustrations. So we're just giving a sense of these frustrations that could be felt and been engaging with a number of IDPs, or internally displaced persons, for quite some time, including people in that area that I was noting earlier on as my site of field work that was burned down during the 2013 attack. One of my friends, who's a tauso, who's an artist, had wrote this song articulating what I noted earlier on as deep-seated frustrations that they felt that they're sleeping to this war. Where would they come to? Where would they locate themselves? And in fact, this particular composition talks about Muslim civilians primarily as just one in the bigger war that is unfolding. The armed conflict between the government and all the rest. I'll just play this song because it's a little bit poignant for us to know what's the impact, what's the frustration when people who are often caught in this complicated conflict of the state.
Kasungit makaw sila lahat na mo mamulong papaluhan masarang sinuha pagkahilang di makatawang na ba isa na mula-mula sa kaumulan nagkakamit magpagkahanap pagkaraon na may lamot na mo Panginig pa na yan ako palabag kami insta'y ng taon ang muray na ang lamo yung makaulong-ulong sa kaulan nakakami
some of the photographs in Jowel. And that's the kind of heart-wrenching story that you can see on the ground, articulated at least in an artistic way, all those things that has going on. But make no mistake, there was some progress as well in the fiscal. This graph is quite interesting because if there were no peace agreements, there are more wars. But when the peace agreement, particularly the framework agreement, the Bangsamoro, and later on the comprehensive agreement, the Bangsamoro, was signed, or any other peace agreements that were signed, in the peace negotiations signed in 2005, 2006, 2007, whenever there is peace negotiation and agreements, conflict drops. There are conflicts, but in terms of numbers, it drops. But, for instance, when an agreement, when peace negotiations collapse, particularly after the Supreme Court had issued in 2008 a decision declaring as unconstitutional the agreement between the Gloria Arroyo government and the MILF in 2008, the conflict spiked again. Until they talked peace again, when peace negotiations was initiated under the Aquino government in 2010 and 2011, conflict drops again. And when the comprehensive agreement was signed, there were zero conflict, at least between the MILF and the government at the very least. So peace negotiations, peace agreement has an impact. It's just that this only represents the government and MILF skirmishes. It doesn't include the MILF. The complication is that while it's successful while the peace negotiations is successful in one group, because it has not been talking to the MNLF, it has not been dealing with the Amasaya, it has not been dealing with all the other forces there, you see the complications of the conflict events being initiated by other forces at play in the region. But there are some progress. So what's the lesson from Mindanao? It's a multi-layered conflict. It's quite complicated. There are justice issues, injustices, issues, which is not just one. It's not just land. There's also human rights violations, there are atrocities, there are welfare issues that are actually left unaddressed. And the actors of the conflict are really diverse. You have secessionists, you have family, you have on the ground, several other groups are engaged in the conflict. And this is why it's a little bit intractable. And you don't actually know how much or how we are gaining ground, but to what direction is still a little bit hazy to assess at the moment. And this also explains why it's a little bit difficult to solve this problem. We are thinking that this problem, the succeeding administrations were not just competent enough, but I'm not so sure how much competency is required with all these layers upon layers and complications on conflict to really address them. I'll just present some of the causes of it. The cause of this conflict is not just frustration, as articulated in the song that I asked to listen to, but it's also making communities really, really vulnerable in any other challenges that they face them. These are the kind of displacement figures that we're seeing. Sorry. Recent wars, 1997 and 2001. 1997, 60,000 people. 2001, that's almost 1 million people being displaced by this warfare. In various times, these are the numbers of displacement that you're seeing. It ranges from 21,000 to 800,000 in different years, depending on how much violence is unfolding at a particular time. So you're speaking of tens of thousands or almost 1 million people. That's a lot, number of people recurring again and again, almost every other year, or every 2 years, or every 3 years. And this is the scale of displacement only for Eastern Mindanao. It doesn't include the displacement in urban areas. And this is the cause of war. Economic loss, 640 billion. The spending for this war is about 73 billion that I told on earlier. But how much loss has been incurred or potential revenues? 640 billion in terms of economy. The war policy, just the 2000 all-out war, cost about 1.3 billion. Total combat expenses, I've already noted earlier on, is 73 billion. Human casualties, I'll just highlight this again, 120,000 people killed already. Social welfare disruption, displacement is just unimaginable. Recently, under the Duterte administration, this is the kind of figures that we are seeing. In July, 114 families have evacuated in the NPA area in Central Resort. About 3,589 persons have evacuated in Asilan in the force of station north outside. It didn't stop, and it continues so no matter how much, no matter the gains that we had done. But apart from that, as I said, this is making communities vulnerable because many of these conflicted areas are also areas at the site of disasters. This is a snapshot of disasters across the country. In terms of displacement, it would still be the disaster, not the weather-induced or earthquake, geological-induced kind of disasters that drives most of the displacement. But in Mindanao, it's a little bit complicated because this disaster induced nationwide due to typhoons, earthquakes, and all the others. When they occur in Mindanao, and they do occur in Mindanao, they do happen in Mindanao, it layers the armed conflict. So you have a separate displacement on armed conflict, and almost the same people are also displaced by flooding, which is quite frequent in many parts of Mindanao. But typhoon, which is also hitting many areas in Mindanao these days. Figures, it's by millions nationwide, it's by hundreds of thousands in terms of armed conflict. Take them all together, it makes communities quite vulnerable to challenges like flood and drought. These are some of the headlines and documentations done by humanitarian groups. Zamboanga City, the pictures that I was showing you earlier, are also victims of flood, and recently, at least in this place, are also suffering from flood as well as of drought. These are areas in Mindanao when most of the conflict areas, especially the conflict areas, are in low-lying places. They are easily inundated by flood, and apart from flooding and armed conflict, these areas to begin with already had suffered from lack of access to basic facilities like water, clean water, electricity, and education, so on and so forth. And problems of job losses also enhance each of the disaster situations. Now, recently, we've been enjoying rains now, but it was quite bad from January, from last year, late last year, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, in many of these parts in Mindanao. There were even forest fires in some parts of Mindanao and power outages. And look at how the distribution of calamity-affected areas due to a long dry spell have been spread out. Yes, it's spread out in many parts of the country, but it's a little bit challenging in Mindanao. The red spots that you're seeing there are the same spots where conflicts are happening, and also the same spot where drought is happening. We have transitioned now since June 2016 to a more wet environment with the onset, or at least with the projected onset of the La Nina phenomena. It's not survived yet, but it's coming, it's growing, and this is how it looks like. Some parts of the Philippines have already enjoyed normal rainfall, but in the same conflict area, in parts of Mindanao there, where you see a number of conflicts happening, it's still below rainfall. So flood, drought, harmful rainfall coming into play, affecting I'll just compare them up. Just for us to appreciate, to see how La Nina, how El Nino, the drought, and La Nina, the wet season, might yet be affecting the same communities that is also frequented by all the problems, the lack of social welfare, access, war, displacement. These are all the same communities that are all affected. It should be no wonder why it's a little bit difficult to solve much of the problems in this area. In addition, we also have problems with governance, slow response of government, especially in the dying days of the recent administration. There have been some problems on land, where to relocate people who were displaced, both by armed conflict and by the disasters. Now, what's the prospects? What's ahead of us? I already said that there were gains, and the gains are the comprehensive agreement in Bangsamoro, the Bangsamoro Basic Law, and currently with the new administration, they had started with implementing talks. They were no longer negotiating for this agreement. They have agreed that they start with the club and the BBL to talk about the implementation. Just to give us an insight on what is the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro, just to refresh us. This is the roadmap for the taking this. The comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro created a transition commission that drafted the Bangsamoro basically. It's a multiple broad-based commission, but dominated mostly by MILF and Muslim representatives. There are a few indigenous peoples and a number of Christians represented in the drafting of the law. They had submitted that to Congress. Congress debated it, but never passed it into law. So therefore, while it was certified as an urgent bill, it was never passed into law. So it was a pending bill. It died with the end of the past administration. Supposedly, after that law was passed, there should have been a plebiscite only in the Bangsamoro areas, and there should be a new government that was established, and the final signing of the long process of this would have been concluded. Now, what's the BBL? The Bangsamoro Basic Law, if it has passed, it would have created the Bangsamoro territory. This is the Bangsamoro territory. The Laudan Mountain, the Bangsamoro areas, the Silay Cebu, Tawtaw, are all encompassing. And it would have created a Bangsamoro parliament, headed by a chief minister with elected representation from party representatives, much the same with the party-list system that we have, only that the party-list system, or the party representative, would comprise the majority, 50%. 40% would be directly elected by the people through their constituencies, and 10% are sectoral representatives, human, women, PWDs, so on and so forth. It should also define the relations between the Bangsamoro government and the national government. The kind of relations that they will be establishing is a relation based on ministerial governing body. They would call it the asymmetrical relations, meaning the Philippine government would still be on top, and the Bangsamoro government would be subsumed under the Philippine government, only that the relationship is ministerial. Now, the problem with this one is that the 1987 Constitution doesn't account for a ministerial kind of government. So this is the kind of situation that is developing, that is complicating the discussion of the Bangsamoro Basic Law. This is also the basis by which some others were critical, who doesn't want the Bangsamoro law to be passed. This is the basis in questioning their constitutionality. So if the law had been passed, expect that someone else who wouldn't want the law to be passed to question it before the Supreme Court based on the constitutionality of a ministerial form of government that is not a department office, that is a regional government in fact. So that complicates the matter, and that requires more points in the past discussion on the basic law. But apart from the basic law, the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro also provided for these other mechanisms. They call that the normalization process. Normalization would have established a Bangsamoro police alongside the establishment of the Bangsamoro government. And it would have also decommissioned, meaning disband, all militia, military, and rebel forces operating on the ground. Supposedly, it's the Bangsamoro police that would take on as the only and sole armed force, or let me say, police force that would have an authority over security in the area. Not the armed forces. The armed forces would only come in if it's being invaded by an alien nation. But if it's just an internal kind of a conflict, the kind of conflict that we're seeing now is the Bangsamoro police against that. Along with that component are many mechanisms, the normalization, establishment of the normalization, peace and security committee that is composed, both of this will be composed by the government, the MNF, and some groups representing different sectors in the Bangsamoro community. The normalization process would have, if the government was passed, this would have kicked in, leading to the clean up of the landmines that is littered all across Bangsamoro areas. The disbandment of private armed groups operating at the Patuan armed groups, the Christian armed groups, the Muslim armed groups, they would have to be disbanded as well. The redeployment or the pull out of the AFP, the armed forces, from the AFP areas or the Moro areas to other parts of the country or back to the barracks. And the establishment of a transitional justice and reconciliation mechanism. This is the most interesting part of this body. All the rest are quite important, but the transitional justice mechanism is a mechanism it's not too familiar with many of us. It's a mechanism that was established in some other countries that have gone through conflicts, primarily dictatorship kind of conflicts. They had done this in Chile, they had done this in Colombia, they've been doing this now in one country in Southeast Asia, I think in Cambodia, they've been doing this in Cambodia. And they would have started this with the Bangsamoro issue. In other contexts, they started this after going through a martial law regime or a dictatorship regime. And in fact, the idea of a transitional justice and reconciliation process was formulated due to the experience of the Philippines from the Marcos dictatorship, the experience of Chile, Argentina from their own dictatorship as well. Except that when they were thinking about this in 1980s, it was a new idea, and we haven't. Our officials wasn't really able to think of establishing a transitional justice and reconciliation mechanism that would address the Marcos atrocities. We didn't do that, but the hope is that it would be done through the Bangsamoro peace process. And there was a draft proposal that was submitted by a Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission that was created by and appointed by President Aquino. And in that proposal, they covered 4 mechanisms: a proposal to address historical injustice, legitimate grievances, human rights violations, and marginalization due to land dispossession of the Moro people from the hands of the government and other agents. This is a composition of the justice. It was headed by a Swiss envoy. I was actually working with them at one point. she comes over to the Philippines to sit as a chair of the Justice Committee because she's done work in Colombia and elsewhere. And it was also staffed by a delegate coming from the government and some other staff. And this is the kind of proposal that they come up. They want a national transitional justice and reconciliation commission on the Bangsamoro at a national level. And this will entail a lot of things. The rewriting of our history, conversation on the atrocities committed primarily against the Moro. Other groups are saying that the Luman should also be part of the conversation, but it was not articulated as much. But the assumption is that the Luman should be part of the conversation as well. Changing the curriculum, education curriculum, addressing the themes of history. That history started in 1521, that has to change. History should be rewritten and reworked into something else. So much changes are being proposed. And that should be done by the board. And later on, processes of justice, healing, and reconciliation should be set up. There are many models in other parts of the world, but this is the kind of things that we wish to do. And these are the kind of processes that we should go through. After all of this, after normalization, as the Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission is established, there should have been a socio-economic development program, primarily for the Bangsamoro, amnesty, so on and so forth. Apart from all those mechanisms, if PBL was passed, this would have been a wealth sharing, part of the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro. The sharing would go like this, primarily on metallic elements, on minerals. 75% of all the proceeds, tax, and if the Bangsamoro government want to engage in mining and other kinds of mineral development, 25% of the profit of the tax will go to the Bangsamoro government, 25% will go to the national government. Currently, it's 100% goes to the national government. It depends on Congress on what to give to the Moro government. Fossil fuel, it will be 50% to the Moro government, 25% to central government for the wage. Okay, what's the prospect now? As already noted, we currently have 3 men from Mindanao at the top of pinnacle of I'm representing President, the Senate President, and the Speaker of the House. There are many issues of concern, in relation. I'll discuss that in 5 minutes. Okay, it's 5 minutes. Sorry. Just give me 2 minutes. Primarily, the biggest concern is where we how will it be affected by the rest of the population. 44% opposes the Bangsamoro agreement and the BBF. 41% of the may not really address their welfare benefit. And so therefore, there should be a way to address this because this is how it looks like. This is the Bangsamoro territory. And a number of these areas also have several indigenous peoples that have to be addressed, and these are the things that have to be I'll just slip on things that we can do. What we can do is we think that we can work in solidarity with the Locals, primarily. Primarily because these are this is a community that is largely neglected, and that is at that both the Lumad Sorry and both the Lumads and the displaced communities, internally displaced persons, whether they're Muslims, Christians, or indigenous peoples, these are the most vulnerable, and the Lumads are the most vulnerable. What kind of engagement? I understand some people think that and what is the framework of solidarity? It is a framework wherein we engage on a relation, not of dominance, but but not also to the simplified notion of help, assistance, or kindness. How solidarity should work? It should work wherein we have to find how else we can productively engage and care for the fellow person, demands and needs calls these days. Not because of our giving hearts, not because of our kindness, but because of the consciousness that that suffering fellow would have been us if the situation was another way around. It could have been us who were displaced, who were emigrated. And so therefore, we had to engage, we had to work on. Because by resolving their problems, we also secure ourselves. Whether we are in Naga, we are in other parts of the Philippines. Because this is a problem that mirrors not only our society, but our situations. And I'll take on from a suggestion by Father Alec, that solidarity should require a diversified approach in response to the evolving multiple strategies that indigenous peoples and especially communities have employed to achieve self-determination. And there are many ways of engaging. Research, education, changing the narrative of history, researching more on what really happened in the past, engaging in conversations on the injustices and atrocities, and speaking out against injustices and atrocities, and knowing that there's no one solution to this problem. So we should be a little bit less critical of the solutions we offer, but we should be more engaging in seeing that the solutions that are being offered to the table are actually solutions that could address our common problems. With the view that we are addressing this problem because of our common humanity and because of the idea that it could be us in their shoes if it was that way around. Thank you very much for
Convocation for sharing us your knowledge about the plight of our brothers and sisters in Mindanao, and most importantly for giving us a clear picture of how we will be able to completely address this social justice issue. Now we will proceed to the next part, the plenary conversations. If you have thoughts or questions on the presentation of Dr. Cadunay, you may approach the microphone and then state your name, your department, the school or the group you represent. We can probably entertain 2 questions. The snacks will be served while the plenary conversation is going on. You may now approach the microphone if you have thoughts, reflections, comments about the presentation of Dr. Cadunay.
Sense of what's happening on the ground. But I believe that it is your purpose. You also gave me other sense of hopelessness and helplessness. There isn't a space for a solution after listening to all of those layers of problems. And I was trying to simplify it as we were going through layers and layers. I was trying to simplify it in my mind, and I was saying that what is happening in Mindanao actually happened to the entire Philippines in the colonization process, where an outside force came in, dominated the Philippines, and the people who got dominated in Luzon and Visayas went to the other areas of Mindanao and reproduced the relations of inequality in that place. And given that, I asked the question, where do we proceed? Where do we start and where do we Manila, from Luzon, from the Visayas. Would you agree that maybe it's about time that we look from the Mindanao side, going out rather than, in other words, my grand question, who has the right to imagine Mindanao? In the same sense that I think we've been talking about the past, the future, and the present of the Philippines, who has the right to imagine the Filipinos and the Philippines? Who has the right to imagine? Are we in the position to imagine Mindanao? Or are the people in Mindanao given that this position to imagine who they should be? It's a question that you need an answer. It could be seconded by other people. Thank you so much. Congratulations. I think you need a bottle of water after 3 hours. Should we give Dr. Edward a bottle of water?
Let me follow this over time. I actually prepared a short report. I was told that you would have 2 hours. And now I actually thank you very much for the questions. I think the videos were taking up some time. But had I had the opportunity to present, probably that would have answered this question. Yes, who's got the right to imagine a solution? And I think everyone has. It's just that it's the way on how we can imagine a solution. There are a few things. This was prepared by my father. I'm also looking at it as quite helpful. To look at least in the context of indigenous peoples as well as on the Cadunay displays, to look at it in different layers. First, the question of identity, the strategic identity of Luman, Jowel people, and indigenous people. And to look at what are the structures, the legal documents and their forms rather, so that we can identify what kind of similarity should we be doing. First, we have to recognize that they're part of the Philippine nation, even though they would assert that they are not Filipinos. And indigenous peoples would also refer to themselves as Filipinos, but with a special consideration. Now, how can we imagine with the communities in Mindanao? It's through the recognition of the rights. It's by recognizing that each and every person there has a right and ready to defend those rights, indigenous people's rights, Moro people's rights, human rights, and so forth, and defending them instead of by recognizing that there are Bangsamoro, there are indigenous peoples, there are IDPs, and not only their identity but also their laws, also their capacity to establish institutions, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we also have to do something quite concrete, such as doing research, doing ethnography, doing projection of these issues, conversations and discussion. A lot of things. There are many things that we can do, but at the heart of the answer to the question is that all of us should be part of the imagination. It's not just people from Mindanao, just IDPs or IPs, but everyone should be engaged. Because this is a very deep problem. I hope that I didn't make you hopeless, but there's so much, this makes it a little bit exciting. There are many avenues where we can enter and when we can join. Because the problem is full yet, and therefore it needs more solutions.
Thank you again, Dr. Cadunay. We apologize for cutting the plenary conversations short, but if you still have questions, you may write them on a piece of paper, and Dr. Cadunay can probably answer the questions after the convocation. So, thank you very much for those who shared their comments. Let us now proceed to the awarding of the plaque of appreciation to our guest speaker today. To award the plaque, may we request Father June Vilay, University President, to be assisted by Dr. Alfredo C. Pagay, Vice President for Higher Education. So citation reads, the Ateneo de University Aviation Formation Center, in partnership with Office of the Vice President for Higher Education and Social Sciences Department, present this plaque of appreciation To Jose Jowel P. Cadunay, Ph.D. Resource person during the first semester academic convocation, faculty conversation. On the theme, Refocusing Our Gaze on Mindanao, a New Frontier. Held on July 28, 2016 at the Arupe Convention Hall at the Mindanao University, Naga City. Given this 28th day of July 2016. Signed, Father Primitivo E. Viray, Jr. S.J., University President. To formally close our academic convocation, let us call on the OIC Principal of the Junior High School and the Province Assistant for Planning, Society of Jesus, Philippine Province, Father Gabriel Jose P. Gonzalez S.J. for the closing remarks and acknowledgement.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Father Cadunay was overwhelmed by the number of 350 people to hear his talk. I think Dr. Jowel, you overwhelmed the 350. As much as we went beyond time, I would just like to say that we are very fortunate because many people can talk about Mindanao. Not very many can give it in the objective way that Dr. Cadunay gave it. And I'm just very appreciative that we heard all this from you. And I know that it will help us in our next steps in trying to figure out how we will participate in the province roadmap. And I'd like to thank also, speak for a moment as Province Assistant for Planning, Father Jun Viray, and all the administrators of the Naga for organizing this convocation with the mind to for us to prepare planning for the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Gabby, with today's substantial input about the plight of our brothers and sisters in Mindanao. May we refocus our gaze on them and may we become more courageous in advocating social changes that would assist victims of injustice in gaining their rights and regaining their human dignity. To lead us in the prayers of thanksgiving to God for this occasion, we call on Ms. Jonabel G. Sixon, faculty member of the Theology Department and a Mindanaoan.
I am sorry, but I have to cut your snacks. Eating your snacks. So may I ask everybody to please rise for our closing prayer. We remind ourselves that we are and always enveloped by the presence of the Trinity, as we all say, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We come before you, O God, praying for peace, as there seems no peace. We must pray more and not give up in offering prayers and spiritual sacrifices for peace in Mindanao and peace in our hearts. The fruit of our prayer is our union with you, our God, as peace is being in union with you at all times. In the silence of our hearts, we now join with the Mindanaoans. Altogether we sigh. God, our Father, you reveal that those who work for peace will be called your children. Help us to work without ceasing for that justice which brings true and lasting peace. Hear our prayer and grant peace to Mindanao, that we may rejoice in your mercy and praise you without end. Mary, Virgin of Light, remember your first shrine in Mindanao, and let the dawn from on high break upon us, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Amen. O Lord, to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit.